You okay? No, not in the slightest, because it never ends. What never ends? These idiots! I can't take this anymore because I keep on hearing the argument again and again. Hi, Player Negative here. Today, I want to talk about a very big common misconception. After all my work covering Sonic videos for most of my channel, I kind of want to explain a massive misconception people just love to hammer around, specifically Dragon Ball fans. Anyone who's played a Sonic game probably knows the stupid controversy where people love to say that the Super Saiyan form is a completely original and Sonic is just a ripoff, which is completely untrue. The Super Saiyan form was the inspiration for Supersonic's design. It was actually based off a cut version that Yuji Naka borrowed from his friend, who just so happens to be the literal father of Dragon Ball. And honestly, just hearing everyone say that it's just a ripoff, specifically done Dragon Ball fans, it just pisses me off because there's a lot more to Sonic than being a Dragon Ball ripoff. And it's not just the super form. Everything about Sonic's franchise is always unanimously compared to Dragon Ball. And to be honest, while on the surface level there are some similarities, Sonic has a lot more depth than DBZ ever will. But let's start with the smallest issue, the super form. Now, the Super Saiyan form is triggered by sheer willpower or by training your body for years. The Chaos form or the supersonic forms are completely different. For starters, you have to have two things that not everybody has: a heart and a soul to use them. Number two, they were created from pure chaos energy. And number three, unlike the Dragon Balls, having one allows you to teleport. The Dragon Balls can't do that. Not to mention, Sonic isn't this overpowered goof, and his friends aren't just disposable idiots who matter nothing to the plot. I've seen hundreds of arguments online comparing Knuckles to Piccolo and Tails to Krillin, which honestly, I don't see that at all. Sure, they're both the little sidekick who follows the main character around, but Tails outgrows that and becomes strong in his own right. He's able to face the main villain with his own skills, and he can fly. Not to mention, he's insanely intelligent. Knuckles, on the other hand, he's not an alien, and number two, he's actually smart. He doesn't just choose to blindly trust people. Piccolo, on the other hand, is a lot more knowledgeable and is more like a monk than what Knuckles is. Also, Sonic's characterization is completely different from Vegeta. Goku. For starters, Sonic doesn't abandon his family or his friends in a heartbeat like he does. Also, unlike Goku, he's not going to be tricked into a toxic relationship with someone. And I'm sorry that hit a few Dragon Ball fans hard, but honestly, there are just so many things that Sonic is more original and, if not better, than DBZ in so many areas. Rather than seeing a bunch of buff, muscular men yell really loud and their hair changes color, Sonic's got a lot more interesting stuff than that. Not to mention, Hypersonic exists years before Ultra Instinct came out, so Sonic could just say Goku's ripping off that. Like, honestly, I would see more interesting stories written in a Sonic comic than what I would ever find in a Dragon Ball manga. And maybe you could say I'm biased, and maybe you could say that I just think Dragon Ball is bad, but I'm honestly okay with Dragon Ball. Specifically, honestly, the character I like the most is Gohan. But, however, nothing can be said right because we gotta address the second problem at hand. A common issue I see is that people constantly compare Shadow to Vegeta, Sonic to Goku, and Trunks to Silver. And Silver was inspired by Trunks, but that's just how far it goes. So with that out of the way, let's just break down the Hedgehog trio and explain why each of them have a lot more original personality that goes deeper than the surface level comparison people blamefully make just to spite any Sonic fans. Starting off with the obvious first choice, Mr. I Am All of Me, Shadow the Hedgehog. Now, to be honest, yeah, you can strike a few similarities to Vegeta and Shadow. There's no lying. They both are competitive with the main protagonist, and they generally have a completely different curvature or opposite design that contrasts against the main character, and they're a little more brash and edgy on things, but that's just where the similarities end. Vegeta constantly wants to one-up Goku and prove that he's better than him. Anytime Goku hits another rank, he wants to immediately outdo that completely. And honestly, Shadow doesn't really do any of that. Unlike Vegeta and Goku, Shadow doesn't try to one-up Sonic the moment he gets faster than he does. He doesn't care about that. He's more calm and collective, he has a sense of empathy to him, and he actually has a mutual respect for Sonic when the writers handle things right, that is, because in other forms of media, they get over really badly. And in all honesty, according to most of the Sonic team directors and to everything else, Shadow shares no inspiration from Vegeta. Actually, he's inspired by Mewtwo for his psychic abilities and his teleportation. Not to mention, the Ultimate Life Form was a title he was given, and it's something that he later drops and believes Sonic is more deserving of. Not to mention, Vegeta can't slow down time, so, there's that. The only similarities they have is that they're very angry and impulsive sometimes, and that they're both aliens. But apart from that, the similarities end there completely. Now, I am not going to ignore the fact that worse iterations of Shadow, when he is written badly, are very similar to Vegeta, but that's just about it. And also, to be honest, I don't hate Vegeta, I just think he's generally annoying and is very much only there to give Goku something to fight every now and then. Shadow has more of a mutual respect for Sonic and is willing to put up with his stupid antics. Goku lacks a lot of common sense and is very dumb. Sonic is not that at all. Also, Shadow is already equal to Sonic, but he doesn't try to beat him, so no, the two are not similar, not in a single area at all. Now, unlike the other characters I've mentioned, Silver actually does share some inspiration or continuity with the character people constantly compare him to. He was actually inspired by future Trunks, but apart from his plot of being from the future and being able to fly, that's just about it. For starters, Trunks doesn't try to do what Silver does in the single slightest apart from fix their broken future. However, how they both take it is completely different. Trunks is in complete despair because Gohan was killed, and Silver actually finds hope in it by going back in time and preventing what happened in the first place. Not to mention, it's stated in a few games, and it's kind of implied sometimes that, Silver's autistic, and why I don't know if this is canon or not. Just by reading some of the comics and by looking at some of the games, I generally get that vibe as someone who's autistic himself. But apart from that, that's kind of where the similarities end with Silver. And I know a lot of people love to say that since he's similar to Vegeta and Silver in one way. You see, one thing that people constantly theorize about Silver and Shadow is that they're related and that Shadow is actually the father of Silver. Now, the only way people back up this theory, apart from the chest poof of fur they have on the front of their torso, you see, in Sonic and the Black Knight, the knight that Shadow is named after is actually named Sir Lancelot, which is related to the knight and is the father of the knight Silver is called. However, this theory kind of drops for two different reasons. Reason number one, Silver never made an appearance in Sonic and the Black Knight with this knight persona because, number one, he was reduced down to the multiplayer mode, which I don't think is canon. Number two, he was cut out of the main storyline. The only reason people think it's possible is because due to the fact that Shadow can't die of old age, that he lived to the point where Silver was. Which, in my opinion, doesn't really make that much sense, and I think is kind of belief in logic. But apart from their surface level plot, they're not that similar. They're actually quite different, but I do like the camaraderie that comes from both characters. So I don't hate the dynamic, I just think that people love to use this just to trash on Sonic fans, saying that your fandom or what you like is not original, which I kind of think is very insulting. Which completely contrasts how this started, since Yuji Naka and his best friend, whose name I can't really pronounce, and for the sake of the Dragon Ball fandom I'm not going to butcher, basically let him do this out of love and respect for each other as friends. So to see people constantly argue about this would probably just be a disrespect to both creators. They both wanted to make something genuine, and they were close friends who were willing to share each other's ideas. So, could you just please stop fighting about this and just learn to respect each other for once? Please? When you create something, you can push the idea that another laid out from prior forward and do it as a passing of the torch or a way to do this. These two things are allowed to coexist. So I really don't like it when people love to trash on the idea of this, saying that it's a knockoff and never became its own thing, because that's absolutely false. The Sonic team literally worked hard to create the world, characters, and story in its own cinematic way that's very interesting and full of depth. And while I am a little bit sorry for what I said about Dragon Ball being nothing more than buff guys yelling with spiky hair, Sonic doesn't try to resemble that. It does do its own thing. So, honestly, I just feel a little bit off about it. And then when Sonic Frontiers came out, it basically tried to embrace the anime roots instead of straying away from it. But they didn't outright copy Super Saiyan form when they were doing this. They literally made it its own thing. Just look at Super Sonic 2. The game did take more of a shonen anime-like dynamic with it, but they didn't copy off Dragon Ball. For starters, for anyone who's actually picked up Frontiers, Super Sonic has multiple special attacks, like creating construct punches, being able to teleport, and wielding a giant sword. Not to mention, he's able to beat up kaijus with it with tremendous strength. While in older games, he could just fly around and knock himself into the enemies, here he has a lot more complex attacks, movesets, with Sonic's own personal skill. So to say this is nothing more than just a knockoff is just straight up untrue. The only thing they share is the yellow, and apart from that, the spiky quills are nothing like Goku's hair. And I'm sorry if I'm being a bit off, but the bare minimum of what I'm trying to explain to each other is that why these two things are very similar to each other, they are inherently different. To just blatantly call one a ripoff of the other is just untrue. These two things are allowed to coexist. And I'm not trying to be rude. And to all I'm trying to say is that in conclusion, these two things are very similar, but at the end, when you look past the surface level, they're their own thing. And you gotta give credit to what people have made. Because in the end of the day, they're both interesting things that people love to look into with very much a open mind as a cool idea for everyone to enjoy. And in all honesty, seeing how far this franchise has come, digging out of the depths of Sega's dungeon, it's just cool to see how far this has gone. So for people who blatantly say that Super Sonic is nothing more than just a big old ripoff, and that the Sonic series is nothing more than a copy of Dragon Ball with furries, is completely untrue. In conclusion, it's a really interesting franchise that happens to share one or two similarities, Like, you don't see Halo suing by Star Wars just because they both have laser swords. The bare minimum of what I'm trying to say is that these two things can coexist and there's nothing wrong with that. So, I hope you enjoy this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Oh, the rest of the audience is gone. Dragon Ball fans are still here. Well, in that case...